as a free country, and she could not use the same cemetery. She needed a special place.
And this could be that special place.
The world's most famous queen, Cleopatra, just revealed her secrets through DNA. Historians expected one thing, but science tells a surprising story about her genes, her looks, and her family. Was she the queen we imagined? Could her real story change history forever? Join us as we explore what her DNA really shows, and it's not what historians expected. The queen who lived in legends. Cleopatra is one of the most famous women in human history. Her name is known almost everywhere, from books to movies, paintings to plays. For more than 2,000 years, people have wondered about her life, her personality, and what she really looked like. She was the last pharaoh of Egypt, ruling a kingdom that had existed for over 3,000 years along the Nile River. Her reign ended in 30 BCE when Rome conquered Egypt, bringing an end to the long line of Egyptian rulers. Cleopatra was not just a ruler. She was a woman whose life combined intelligence, charm, power, and mystery in ways that still capture the imagination today. From the moment she became queen, Cleopatra proved to be extraordinary. She was highly educated, speaking possibly 9 languages. She could communicate with Greeks, Egyptians, Romans, and other peoples across her kingdom and beyond. She studied mathematics, philosophy, astronomy, and the art of persuasive speaking. Her intelligence gave her a strong advantage in diplomacy and politics. Cleopatra understood the complicated world of the Mediterranean, and she used her skills to protect Egypt and maintain her family's power. Her political alliances made history. She formed relationships with Julius Caesar, the powerful Roman general, and later with Mark Antony, another influential Roman leader. These partnerships were more than romantic. They were strategic moves to protect her country, secure her position, and influence the growing power of Rome. Cleopatra's role in these alliances showed her ability to combine personal charm with political skill. Her decisions shaped not just Egypt, but the course of the Mediterranean world. Yet, despite everything known about her intelligence and political skill, one question has always fascinated people. What did Cleopatra actually look like? Across centuries, artists, writers, and filmmakers have created images of her, often focusing on beauty, glamour, and exotic allure. From Renaissance paintings to Hollywood films, Cleopatra has been portrayed as a stunning European-looking woman with pale skin and delicate features. These images have influenced how generations imagined her. Stories about her beauty, her voice, and her personality added to the legend, making it difficult to separate fact from fiction. Historians have long debated her ancestry and ethnic background. Cleopatra's family, the Ptolemaic dynasty, was of Macedonian Greek origin. Her ancestors arrived in Egypt after the death of Alexander the Great, and for centuries, the family kept power through marriage within the family. Greek was their main language, and they worshipped Greek gods alongside Egyptian ones. Because of this, many scholars assumed Cleopatra was mostly Greek. However, there were gaps in the family record. The identity of her grandmother on her father's side, for example, remains unknown. This gap left room for speculation about whether Cleopatra may have had Egyptian, Syrian, or other Middle Eastern ancestry. For centuries, no one could be sure. Complicating the picture, much of what we know about Cleopatra comes from Roman writers. These sources were often biased, written decades after her death, and sometimes exaggerated or misrepresented facts to serve political goals. Roman historians emphasized her relationships with Caesar and Antony, while downplaying her intelligence, her achievements, and her leadership. They often painted her as a seductress, someone who used beauty and charm to manipulate men. Egyptian art from her own time, on the other hand, represented her according to traditional artistic conventions, which focused more on symbolism than realistic portraits. Later generations added their own interpretations, blending myth, imagination, and propaganda. Because of these mixed accounts, Cleopatra became a figure both real and imagined. She is at once a brilliant ruler, a multilingual scholar, a powerful queen, and a subject of endless myth and speculation. Coins, sculptures, and writings give pieces of the puzzle, but none show the whole picture. Her life is recorded in fragments filtered through centuries of cultural, political, and artistic reinterpretation. Historians have studied these fragments for generations, Yet basic questions about her appearance and ancestry remained unanswered. And that is the mystery. How much of what we think we know about Cleopatra is real? How much is shaped by imagination, propaganda, and later artistic ideas? For centuries, scholars could only guess. They studied coins, statues, and texts. But without direct evidence, Cleopatra herself remained hidden, her true identity locked away by history. But all the stories, the coins, the paintings, how much of it is real? To find out, scientists had to go where no historian could ever go, inside her DNA. The DNA revolution. The study of history has changed more in the last 20 years than in hundreds of previous ones. One of the biggest revolutions comes from DNA. This tiny thread inside every living cell carries information about who we are, where we come from, and even how we look. DNA technology allows scientists to look back thousands of years and find details about people we once thought would remain forever mysterious. Cleopatra is one of the most famous examples. The challenge with Cleopatra is simple but enormous. Her tomb has never been found. No remains can be confirmed as hers. For centuries, historians and archaeologists have searched through temples, pyramids, and hidden chambers along the Nile, but Cleopatra's final resting place is still unknown. Without her bones, understanding her ancestry seemed impossible. Traditional methods like studying coins, statues, and writings could only suggest guesses. DNA, however, offers a way to go further, even without her physical remains. Scientists realized they could study her indirectly. Her closest relatives, her sisters, brothers, and possibly children, might carry the same genetic information. By analyzing their DNA, researchers can reconstruct Cleopatra's genetic makeup. This approach is not easy. It is like trying to solve a puzzle when most of the pieces are missing. Each fragment of DNA must be carefully compared, matched, and studied to create a complete picture. A breakthrough came with the discovery of Cleopatra's sister, Arsinoe. Her remains were found in Ephesus in modern-day Turkey, near the famous Temple of Artemis. Arsinoe's bones were remarkably well preserved for their age. This discovery became central to the DNA study. Scientists realized that by sequencing her DNA, they could get clues about Cleopatra's genes. Every bone, every tiny fragment of tissue became an invaluable piece of information. Extracting DNA from ancient bones is extremely delicate work. Bones that are over 2,000 years old are fragile, and the DNA inside them is broken into tiny pieces. Scientists must work in completely sterile conditions to prevent contamination from modern DNA, which can come from skin, hair, or even the air. Special tools, clean rooms, and careful procedures are required. Each sample is cleaned, powdered, and treated to isolate the remaining DNA. It is a slow and painstaking process. Once the DNA is extracted, the real work begins. Advanced sequencing technology allows scientists to read these tiny fragments. It is like piecing together a shredded manuscript, letter by letter. Sophisticated computers compare the fragments, check for errors, and reconstruct the genetic code. This process can take months or even years. Every match is double-checked, every anomaly investigated, because even a small mistake could change the conclusions. Through these methods, researchers can finally go beyond coins, statues, and myths. They can see the real genetic heritage of Cleopatra's family. The technology is powerful enough to show connections between Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, revealing histories that written records alone cannot. DNA allows scientists to peek behind the curtain of centuries of rumor, art, and propaganda. Finally, after decades of waiting, the results were in, and they would shock the world. But what did Cleopatra's genes really reveal? That answer would change how history understood one of its most famous queens and challenge everything people thought they knew about her. Breaking the Greek myth. For centuries, people assumed Cleopatra was purely Macedonian Greek. Her family, the Ptolemies, ruled Egypt after Alexander the Great, and they married within their own dynasty to preserve Greek heritage. Historians believe that Cleopatra was a beautiful, pale-skinned Greek woman who represented her dynasty's strict ethnic traditions. For 2,000 years, this image dominated art, literature, and film. It was the story everyone accepted. DNA, however, told a very different tale. The genetic evidence from Cleopatra's family, including her sister Arsinoe, revealed a more complex picture. Cleopatra was not purely Greek. Her DNA contained clear markers from North Africa. These genes suggest deep connections to local populations living along the Nile, showing that her ancestry included Egyptians who had lived in the region for thousands of years. This discovery alone reshapes how we understand the Ptolemaic dynasty. But there was more. Cleopatra's genes also carried markers associated with sub-Saharan Africa. These markers indicate connections to populations further south, suggesting that her family's ancestry was more diverse than previously imagined. It was not unusual for ancient Egypt to interact with neighboring regions through trade, conquest, and diplomacy, but this evidence confirms that Cleopatra herself reflected this diversity. Finally, her DNA showed Levantine ancestry, linking her to populations in Syria, Lebanon, and surrounding areas. This reveals how the Mediterranean world was already interconnected. Cleopatra was not an isolated queen of a distant Greek colony. She was a product of centuries of migration, intermarriage, and cultural exchange. Her family represented a blend of African, Middle Eastern, and European roots, reflecting the cosmopolitan nature of Alexandria, the city she ruled. These findings challenge long-held assumptions about the Ptolemies. Historians assume they maintained strict ethnic purity, marrying only within Greek lines. Cleopatra's DNA proves otherwise. Her multiracial heritage shows that even a royal dynasty believed to be fully Greek was more diverse than history recorded. This also challenges European portrayals of her. For centuries, artists and filmmakers imagined her as pale-skinned and European. The DNA evidence shows that this image was not accurate. Cleopatra's real identity was more complex, richer, and more connected to the diverse world of her time. Cleopatra emerges from the shadows of history as a multiracial, cosmopolitan queen. She represents not just the Ptolemaic dynasty, but the wider diversity of ancient Alexandria. Her ancestry reflects the movement of people, ideas, and cultures across continents, centuries before modern globalization. She was at once African, Middle Eastern, and European, embodying a world far more connected than people of later centuries imagined. If Cleopatra was not the pale-skinned Greek beauty imagined in art and myth, then what did she really look like? Could science finally give the world an answer? Her face, her features, and her image had been a mystery for thousands of years. DNA had answered her ancestry, but the question of her actual appearance was still to come. Reconstructing Cleopatra's face. The DNA discoveries did more than reveal Cleopatra's ancestry. They allowed scientists to imagine what she actually looked like. DNA contains specific markers that can predict physical traits. These markers provide information about skin tone, eye color, hair texture, and facial structure. Using modern technology, researchers can analyze these markers to create a scientifically informed reconstruction of a person who lived thousands of years ago. For Cleopatra, this meant moving beyond centuries of myth and speculation. Her skin tone, according to the genetic evidence, was likely somewhere between a Mediterranean olive and a darker brown. This fits with her mixed heritage, combining North African, Sub-Saharan, and Levantine roots. Her hair texture was probably curly or wavy, rather than straight, reflecting the combination of ancestral influences. Scientists also examined her likely facial features. Cleopatra may have had a strong nose, full lips, and mixed Mediterranean traits in her eyes and jawline. These features together suggest a regal, distinctive appearance rather than the pale European version depicted in much of modern art. These scientific findings contrast sharply with Roman propaganda. Roman writers often portrayed Cleopatra as dangerously seductive or overly foreign. Coins and sculptures from her own time sometimes depicted her with exaggerated features to emphasize power or divine association. Later, European artists reimagined her as a pale-skinned beauty, fitting their cultural ideals rather than historical reality. These portrayals shaped how the world imagined Cleopatra for centuries, creating an image that is still common today. DNA reconstruction now challenges those interpretations. Modern technology allows researchers to create three-dimensional models based on skeletal features, combined with predicted skin tone and hair type. These models are already influencing museums, films, and educational materials. Visitors can see a Cleopatra who reflects her real ancestry and her diverse cultural background. Films and documentaries can now present a queen whose appearance is historically supported rather than invented. Correcting her image is not just about accuracy, it also honors the true multicultural reality of ancient Egypt. Reconstructing Cleopatra's face is significant for more than appearances. It helps people understand the cultural blending of Alexandria, a city that combined Egyptian, Greek, African, and Middle Eastern populations. Cleopatra herself was a living example of that diversity. Museums and films that adopt this evidence help audiences appreciate a more accurate and inclusive version of history. Cleopatra's face becomes a symbol of scientific discovery and cultural understanding, bridging the gap between myth and reality. Yet, DNA tells only part of the story. To understand Cleopatra fully, we also need to see the world she lived in and the forces that shaped her rule. The hidden politics of the Mediterranean. Cleopatra did not live in isolation. She ruled during a time of intense political competition, economic growth, and cultural exchange. Alexandria, her capital, was one of the most important cities in the Mediterranean world. It was a hub of trade, learning, and diplomacy, connecting Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Ships from all over the region brought goods, ideas, and people to the city's bustling harbors. Its streets were filled with merchants, scholars, and artisans, representing a wide array of ethnic and cultural backgrounds. The diversity of Alexandria influenced every aspect of life, including politics. Cleopatra's family understood the importance of alliances through marriage and integration. Royal families did not simply marry for love, they married strategically. These marriages created connections with other powerful families and local populations. They strengthened the dynasty's control and helped secure peace. Cleopatra herself was both a product and a participant in these strategies. Her ancestry reflects these political choices, blending Greek, African, and Levantine heritage to maintain influence in a cosmopolitan kingdom. Trade and commerce reinforced political relationships. Alexandria's position on the Nile and near the Mediterranean made it a natural center for economic activity. The city controlled access to key trade routes that connected the Mediterranean to the Red Sea and beyond. This economic power allowed Cleopatra to negotiate with other rulers on favorable terms. Her alliances with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony were not only personal, but also political and economic strategies to protect Egypt's independence in a turbulent world. Socially, Alexandria was a melting pot. People from across the Mediterranean and Africa lived, worked, and intermarried there. This diversity was mirrored in Cleopatra's court, which included officials, scholars, and soldiers of many backgrounds. Her mixed heritage made her relatable to a wider population and helped her maintain support among different groups. It also reflected the practical reality of ruling a kingdom that had long been connected to trade networks and cultural exchange. Cleopatra's genetic diversity was a natural reflection of the cosmopolitan environment she ruled. Her ancestry was not an anomaly, but a strategic advantage, connecting her to multiple regions and ethnic groups. She could draw on her Greek heritage to legitimize her rule, while her African and Levantine ancestry strengthened ties with local populations and neighbors. Her mixed heritage allowed her to navigate the complex political landscape of the Mediterranean with sophistication and skill. Understanding the politics of Cleopatra's time is essential for understanding her as a ruler. Her reign was shaped by the need to balance internal power, foreign alliances, and economic interests. Alexandria was not only a city, but a symbol of her kingdom's wealth, diversity, and strategic importance. Her family's decisions, including marriage and political alliances, reveal a deep awareness of how culture, ethnicity, and power intersected in the ancient world. But the most unexpected surprises were not in politics or appearance. They were buried in the genes themselves, waiting centuries to be revealed. Secrets buried in DNA. Cleopatra's DNA has done more than clarify her ancestry. It has opened a window into the hidden aspects of her life that no document, coin, or statue could reveal. Ancient genetics can uncover traits, predispositions, and patterns that shaped her health, her family, and even her environment. By studying DNA from her close relatives, scientists can make careful predictions about the conditions Cleopatra may have faced, the challenges her body overcame, and the lifestyle of royal families in her era. One area of discovery is health and genetic traits. While Cleopatra's exact medical history remains unknown, her DNA may indicate tendencies that were common in her family line. This could include inherited metabolic traits, how her body processed certain foods, and potential predispositions to illnesses that were frequent among Mediterranean populations. Such findings reveal how nutrition and lifestyle were connected to survival and longevity in a royal household. They also suggest how leaders like Cleopatra might have managed physical challenges while maintaining the demanding responsibilities of rule. Genetic analysis also hints at longevity and resilience. Certain markers in her family line suggest that members of the Ptolemaic dynasty had strong adaptive traits that helped them survive illnesses and environmental stresses. This insight sheds light on how Cleopatra and her ancestors could live through political turmoil, wars, and disease outbreaks while ruling a vast and diverse kingdom. It also shows the importance of royal medical knowledge, diet, and lifestyle in extending the lives of rulers in the ancient world. Migration patterns and cultural mixing are another revelation. Cleopatra's DNA confirms that her family was not isolated. It shows movements across North Africa, the Levant, and even connections with sub-Saharan regions. These migrations contributed to a mixture of genetic traits, reflecting centuries of intermarriage, trade, and political alliances. This evidence transforms our understanding of royal households. They were not closed Greek dynasties, but dynamic families interacting with multiple cultures, adopting new traditions, and blending populations over generations. The study of her genes also gives insight into broader Mediterranean life. Cleopatra's DNA reflects the diversity of Alexandria, a city that attracted merchants, scholars, and settlers from across continents. These findings expand our understanding of royal life in Egypt and the Mediterranean. Genetics shows us that kings and queens were human, subject to the same patterns of health, inheritance, and adaptation as their people. They were influenced by diet, environment, and family lineage. Their power was not only political, but biological. DNA uncovers patterns that written records often ignored, revealing a queen who was both extraordinary and real. Perhaps the most important takeaway is how genetics can rewrite history. Cleopatra's DNA teaches us that the past holds secrets beyond what monuments, coins, or manuscripts can tell. Each genetic marker adds a layer of truth to the story, clarifying myths and correcting assumptions. If her DNA could tell us secrets her tomb never revealed, imagine what other ancient mysteries might be waiting for modern science to uncover. How the world reacted. The revelations from Cleopatra's DNA sent shockwaves across the world. Media outlets immediately picked up the story, describing a queen whose ancestry and appearance differed from centuries of assumption. Social media erupted with discussions, debates, and memes. People shared images of the reconstructed Cleopatra, comparing them to familiar movie portrayals and historical depictions. The story captured attention because it combined science, mystery, and the timeless fascination with one of history's most famous figures. Museums quickly responded. Exhibits featuring Cleopatra were updated to include the latest genetic findings. Educational programs introduced discussions about ancestry, cultural mixing, and historical accuracy. School curricula began exploring the implications of the research, emphasizing that history is not fixed, but can be clarified by new evidence. Museums also used these findings to highlight Alexandria's diversity, the cosmopolitan nature of the Ptolemaic dynasty, and the interconnectedness of ancient civilizations. Hollywood and the entertainment industry also took notice. Filmmakers and casting directors reconsidered how Cleopatra should be portrayed on screen. For decades, actresses playing her were often chosen based on European beauty standards rather than historical evidence. Now, studios face the challenge of aligning storytelling with fact. Discussions emerged about representation, the responsibility of the media in presenting history, and the importance of embracing a more accurate depiction of her heritage. Academics and historians were equally engaged. Some debated the interpretation of the DNA results, while others welcomed the chance to revise textbooks and scholarly materials. These discussions focused on understanding Cleopatra's ancestry, her role in Alexandria, and the wider implications of using science to clarify history. Scholars also highlighted how biases in historical records, particularly Roman propaganda, had shaped misconceptions for centuries. The DNA findings offered a chance to challenge these distortions and introduce a more inclusive view of the past. The broader impact was cultural as well as scientific. The discovery sparked conversations about racial representation in history, the role of cultural bias in shaping narratives, and the power of evidence to correct long-held assumptions. Yet, the DNA is only the beginning. Cleopatra's legacy is not frozen in the past. It continues to teach us lessons for the present and future. The legacy of Cleopatra's DNA. Cleopatra's DNA has left a mark that goes far beyond confirming her ancestry. It reshapes our understanding of ancient Mediterranean societies and challenges the assumptions that have shaped history for centuries. For a long time, Cleopatra was imagined as a pale-skinned Greek queen, isolated from the African and Levantine populations around her. The genetic findings reveal a more complex truth. She was multiracial, with North African, Sub-Saharan, and Levantine roots. This shows that Alexandria and the Mediterranean were deeply interconnected, with cultures, families, and populations blending over centuries. Cleopatra's DNA confirms that diversity was not only present, but central to power, society, and culture in her world. Science has played a crucial role in rewriting this history. Historians relied for centuries on coins, statues, and texts, many of which were filtered through Roman propaganda. Written records were biased, often exaggerating or altering facts to serve political goals. Art and literature added myths, shaping a story that was as much about perception as reality. DNA allows researchers to bypass these filters. By studying the biological evidence preserved in ancient remains, scientists can reveal truths that no text or painting could fully capture. Cleopatra's genome demonstrates the power of science to correct historical misconceptions and offer a more accurate, inclusive understanding of the past. The implications for modern discussions about identity are profound. Multiculturalism, intermarriage, and cross-regional connections are not modern inventions. They existed even in ancient royal households. Recognizing the diversity in Cleopatra's ancestry reminds us that human societies have always been complex and interconnected. It also challenges long-standing stereotypes about race and power, showing that influence and leadership are not tied to a single ethnicity or appearance. The research into Cleopatra's DNA has inspired ongoing scientific projects. One major goal is still to locate her tomb. Despite decades of searching, no confirmed resting place has been found. Discovering it could provide direct access to her remains, allowing scientists to study her DNA firsthand. This would refine current knowledge and offer even deeper insight into her life, health, and heritage. Other projects are expanding the study of DNA from historical figures. Scientists are examining remains from Egyptian pharaohs, Roman rulers, and leaders across Europe, Africa, and Asia. Each study adds pieces to the puzzle of ancient human history, showing migration, cultural mixing, and the evolution of families and societies. Preservation of ancient samples is a priority, ensuring that future technologies can analyze them more accurately. As DNA sequencing becomes more advanced, researchers will be able to uncover details that were once impossible to detect. Cleopatra's DNA serves as a model for how genetics can open doors to new historical understanding. The cultural impact is equally significant. Museums, textbooks, and films are updating depictions of Cleopatra to reflect her true heritage. Educators use her story to teach students about diversity, science, and the importance of questioning assumptions. Popular culture now has the opportunity to celebrate her identity in a way that is historically accurate and inspiring. By combining history and science, Cleopatra has become a symbol of how knowledge evolves and how evidence can reshape our understanding of the past. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.